Welcome to flowing practice video number 3. Again, the purpose of this video, just like the first two, is to give you some real flowing practice from our speech given in a real debate round. As always, I'm going to flow on our document here. I would encourage you to flow on a separate sheet of paper, and once the speech is finished, then check back to see did all of the arguments made in the round make it on your flow as well. Again, please excuse the handwriting. When switching over to digital, it's a little hard to keep it from getting sloppy sometimes. As well, please excuse the spacing. When I'm not able to flip down to the back of the page, I have to move to the right here. So on your own flow, I would try and keep it vertical in one column, but for our purposes, I do have to space it out a little here. At the end, as always, I'll go back and explain and go through each argument, as well as any tips for flowing in this speech. All right, let's get started.
They say that there is no impact to the 1AC, but our Burrow evidence differs. It says that in a world of no anonymity, democracy will backslide, will give way to Nazism and Orwellian states. And even if they are correct, our Gill's evidence says that drone use will continue to expand and violations of human rights will get worse to the extent that our Wi-Fi at home will be tracked and our phone calls will be listened to. Next, they read this Gallington evidence, but we agree that there is no absolute right to privacy, but think that drones should not be able to track us and should be legally used by law enforcement, just like all other surveillance. Currently, there's a distinction between drones and other forms of surveillance. I would like you to group the last three arguments. Drones are far different than other surveillance because they go unspotted and can even look into your bedroom window. Second, the idea that just because there's other surveillance exists is the same logic that says two wrongs justify a right. Or two, yes. And three, extend our San Pedro evidence from solvency. It answers McNeil because it proves that the plan puts drones under the same legal plane as other forms of surveillance. And drone surveillance is just beginning. It's best to block it now. Rothus, 2014. Drones represent an unprecedented surveillance tech that could jeopardize privacy. Drones recognize faces and track movement with only minimal data. Drones have the ability to break into wireless networks, monitor phone calls, and these advancements present privacy challenges that were not contemplated when existing laws were developed. Now on to solvency. First, the Morrison evidence. This evidence says we should expand the panopticon to surveil every person always. This proves the 1AC totalitarianism example, and it is very probable that this runs away and infringes on all of our rights. That's a sheer in 2015. We know the Roman Empire, Germany, the Soviet Union, when unchallenged authority, not only violates human rights, but will sow the seeds of ruin. We are flirting with imperial hubris. Leaving those lies unchallenged seriously weakens the position of the United States. And the unfinished piece of Whitlock evidence is answered by our San Pedro claim, or evidence, which says that exigent circumstances, when they exist, means that law enforcement will be able to respond to emergencies without any need of warrants. This solves all of their concerns. Now into the terrorism dissent. First, the uniqueness debate. Uniqueness proves that drones don't solve terror because threats are coming in the status quo. That is their Bolton evidence. And it will only get worse as we collect more data. This is Weiss in 2015. The haystack continues expanding, and the fear of terrorism has produced change in the American psyche that though there is no evidence that the collection of such data has resulted in the discovery of terrorist plots, the reduction in freedom is a major consequence of hyping terrorism. Now, the link debate. This link is generic and does not apply to the plan at all. This is proven in cross-ex. And more specifically, the USA Freedom Act last week should have triggered the link because it's just about metadata. And many law enforcement agents refuse to use drones. The plan provides them with effective means to do so. This is Samadosi in 2014. The absence of drone restrictions presents a gaping hole in American privacy protections and puts law enforcement in a predicament. And law enforcement offices are refusing to integrate drone technology. The lack of law focus on privacy is threatening privacy and preventing law enforcement from taking advantages of new tech. And the impact debate. This evidence is about nuclear terrorism, but the negative has not isolated a single group or explained how they will be able to get nukes or get them into the United States. And they certainly have not proven how drones will prevent nuclear weapons from crossing the Canadian border or being flown into the United States. And their experts have a motive to exaggerate the likelihood of attacks. This is Weiss in 2015. There's a tendency on the part of security advocates to hype threats. There is now evidence of such advocacy being used to distort the purposes of overcoming political oppositions for policies stemming from ideology. The most appropriate attitude should be one of skepticism. I now open myself for cross-examination.
All right, I hope everyone was able to get all of that flowed okay. I realize now that green may not be the best color to flow in, so in a round I might use maybe a darker green if you do like to use that. Blue, red, and black are good colors to often keep too. All right, let's go through each argument and I'll talk about some points. There's one new flowing part here as well to talk about. I'll address that when we get there. So this is the 2AC of the same round from videos 1 and 2. And because of that, they started with case and then moved on to the disadvantage, which you can see is separated right here. So let's start with case. First, they said on the impact, they extended their Burrow piece of evidence. So I would always try to keep the citation or the author from the evidence they're extending, because that tells you which author to go back and look at. And then the warrant. So they say that the omnanimity is, I think, the word they're talking about. It says collapses democracy. Like I said, that's their Burrow evidence. And then their Gillis or Gillen's evidence says that drones increase deterrence. So that's another extension there, so make sure you get the author. And then they extend their Gowington piece of evidence that says that it's not used for tracking illegal data and stuff like that. Next, and this is the new part here, they grouped 3 arguments. So they grouped the next 3 arguments on the flow. And then you'll notice that I kind of put some brackets here on my flow. Now, if I were flowing on a sheet of paper, I would put those brackets across those 3 arguments. So, for example, let's say it's these 3 arguments that they grouped. I would put my brackets like so that I know the answer to that applies to this argument, second one, and that third one there. And they said that, essentially the 2 wrongs don't make a right argument here, that it's not a reason that we should still allow drone use as well. Next, they go into the solvency. Well, not the solvency yet, but they are talking about the San Pedro evidence here, which says that the plan still leaves drones legal. It's just that they would need to have a warrant before police would be able to use them to surveil. Next, they say that they make an argument about how some things are blocked now, that there is some monitoring that is blocked now with things like that do require warrants and things like that, and then just recording some warrants, different use of warrants. Legal warrants are used for blocking now. The warrants for the evidence, the warrants for like the argument, debate warrants are written underneath there. Then they jump to solvency. They read this more, or they extend this Morrison evidence. And again, that's another point where, maybe a line under the evidence like that helps, because there is an author here. So that could get me confused to say, okay, there is an author. Is that a citation? Well, because there's no line underneath it down here, that tells me no, that's an extension of an argument they made earlier. And they said that the panopticon is bad, and the probability or that the problem leads to dehumanization there. And then they read this DeShear evidence, which essentially extended on that argument that it leads to dehumanization. Then they extended the Whitlock evidence, which said that exigent circumstances, meaning that the fact that police could get a warrant means that they would still be able to use drones for surveillance and things like that. Essentially, they're saying drones aren't completely outlawed. It's just harder to use. Police have to prove that there's suspicion of a crime that occurred to use the drones. And then they jump to the dissent here. Like I talked about in the last video, I use uniqueness, so I circled the big U there so I know what part of the dissent is. And again, no line underneath tells me that this is an analytical argument. And they said that there's no threats now. There's no terrorist organizations are stealing nuclear weapons now. Then they read this Weiss piece of evidence that said that using drones and increasing the amount of data to keep track of terror suspects and things like that is actually worse because things just get lost in the data. There's a point where there's too much. Next, they cited from CrossX, and that's a good one to mark on your flow because that is a warrant. They're saying essentially look back at, think back to what happened in CrossX, that the link doesn't apply. Next, they go on to say that law enforcement doesn't have the means to, efficiently and effectively use these drones, so we don't need them around. It's not like a bad thing's going to happen. And one thing here is that I missed the author. So I didn't catch, maybe I didn't hear it, maybe I, was catching up on my flow, maybe I couldn't tell. So what I did is I put an X with a circle there, because that tells me that maybe in CrossX, I'll have my partner say, hey, or I could ask, who was the author to this piece of evidence? Because I do want to go back and look at that to make sure that I can answer it if I'm the other team or extend it if I'm the same team. And then lastly, they read this last piece of Weiss evidence here, which said that the impact that there's no, terror groups getting nuclear weapons now. So that's it for flowing practice 3. Again, I would encourage you to, if you missed anything on this speech, to try it again. Every time you flow it and redo it, your flowing skills will get a little bit better and you'll hear it a little bit more. So keep practicing. It'll get a little more perfect each time and you'll get better and better at flowing.